Hello, everyone. Before we start today's session, I would like to thank those who have been contributing to the course and submitting your works. I've been very happy to see some of your works and see that in the feedback forms, you do analyze and you do evaluate your own works in a very um, interesting and thorough way. So thank you very much for those who do contribute, and those who unfortunately don't have time to do assignments as often as I post them, that's fine. Just do them in your own time and I'll check them as soon as you submit them. So if you remember, our previous session was about speaking parts 1 and 2. Today, we're going to look at speaking part 3, and I will show you how to listen to the question carefully and consider the function, not just the content, but the function of the question. Let me start with a short revision. As you probably remember, in speaking part 1, you're asked to you're asked several personal questions, and the examiner says it. Well, for part 1, I'm going to ask you some personal questions. You will have about 15 to 20 seconds to answer each of them, and the whole part lasts no more than about 4 minutes. Now, the next 3 minutes or so are allotted to speaking part 2. As you probably remember, you're given 1 minute to think about what you're going to say. You're given a cue card with a task. And then after 1 minute, when you take notes, you are given 2 minutes for the monologue. The examiner is not going to talk with you. The most you can hope for is a nod and a smile. After that, the examiner usually asks one more question relating to the topic and moves on to the third section. So as I said, the third section is our main goal today, our main focus. And if the whole speaking part lasts about 14 minutes, the first one takes about 4, the second takes about 3 or so, we're left with 7 whole minutes of speaking part 3. And let me tell you something from the get-go. The most common mistakes, most common mistake that students make in speaking part 3 is speaking about themselves. Everyone likes speaking about themselves. I know I do. But in part 3, the examiner is going to say, we've been talking about blah, 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 and now I'm going to ask you more general questions about it. So you will have to talk about people or events in general, about your city, about your peers, about your country or the world in general, history maybe, but not about yourself. Now, some of my questions ask me, yes, but aren't we encouraged to use our own experiences? Yes, that's fine if you use your own experiences, but as long as it's not the focus of your whole 30 to 45 seconds answer, that's fine. Still, I would encourage you to concentrate more on things in general. And of course, you want to use phrases like this: on the whole, in general, things like that. They help the examiner understand that, well, you know what you're talking about. You're not going to tell your grandma's life story. So we're going to look at some questions. First of all, we will look at good and bad examples of answering questions in part 3, and I will show you how to analyze the grammar of the question in order to identify its function. Let me share my screen first of all. Right, so I've got 5 questions here and 5 functions, which we will match in a minute. But first, let's concentrate on the questions themselves. If you remember me talking about planning the essay, you probably remember that I'm completely against starting planning your essay straight away. I wanted you to underline the words. I wanted you to cover the task and recite it to yourself to really make sense of the question, to really make sure that you deeply understand it. And this is what I'm going to ask of you in speaking as well. Of course, you are not going to see the question, only hear it in part 3. But that is not going to stop us from analyzing it. So let's look at the first question first. If private cars were completely banned from the most overcrowded cities, what might happen? Now, what if I start saying something like, well, we shouldn't do that. Private cars bring in a lot of good to the city. Private cars need gas, so it supports business. Private cars are very convenient. I use a car to travel to my office or to my university every day. Is it a very good answer? Forgetting about the primitive vocabulary and grammar. No, it is going to be a very bad answer. And the reason is that we're not asked whether we should ban cars from the cities. Are we? Now, if we analyze the grammar, we will see that the function is really the following. If private cars were banned, those who have completed intermediate and upper intermediate course of English can recognize that it's something that's called second conditional. And second conditionals consist of if and past simple in the if clause. The function of second conditional is talking about unreal or unlikely events in the future. You can also notice that the question contains a might. So we are asked to speculate about possible results of this unlikely situation. So as you can see, just describing the advantages of private cars for the cities is not going to cut it. You are not going to receive a very good score if you talk about that. So let's walk through the rest of the questions. B, how was family life different before transport links connected most towns and cities? Again, grammar is going to help us. How was something different before? So answering this question, are you going to use mostly past tenses, present tenses, or future tenses? I would definitely use past tenses and maybe present perfect in this case, because we're asked to compare the period in the past and more recent period, aren't we? So, of course, talking about what might happen to family life in the future, again, is not a very good strategy here. C, which is preferable? Living on the top floor of a studio apartment block in a city or in a beautiful house in the middle of the countryside? Present simple. Which is preferable? We're asked to choose, right? So it might be wise to speculate about that in present. We'll see how people do that in a minute. D, why do people decide to move from the city to the countryside? Again, why do people? Present simple. Probably a good idea to keep to present simple answering this question. And the last one, a tricky one. How might overpopulation affect city life in the future? Now, if your main focus answering this question is how bad overpopulation is and how some parts of the world are suffering from that, it's not going to be the right way to do that, because we are asked about A, the effect of the overpopulation in the future, and secondly, we're asked to speculate. Might means that we are asked to consider a hypothetical event, something that is likely or unlikely to happen. So you're welcome to use other modal verbs: might, could, is likely, is unlikely, can. All of these should be on your palette of grammar structures even before you open your mouth to answer the question. So we're going to match the functions on the right to the questions on the left. And if you want to do it on your own first, please stop the video now. If you didn't, let's look at it together. So making a prediction is obviously going to be E, because we just covered this question, didn't we? Talking about the future is making a prediction. Now, some of my students struggle with compare and contrast. They say, well, aren't we asked to compare and contrast in question B and in question C? But if you notice that in B, we're asked to compare past and present, it all starts making sense. Now, compare and contrast is question C. So you probably will have to use comparative structures a lot. And analyzing past and present, 5, is B. Because, well, guess what? You're going to analyze past and present. Considering a hypothetical situation, now, again, you might say that it's E, how might overpopulation affect city life in the future. But hypothetical means unlikely here. If private cars were, second conditional is what gives it away. Lastly, cause and effect is of course expressed by the question word why. So there you go. These are the answers. Again, why is it important to identify the function? If you stray away from the function, you're not going to score very high, because best case scenario, you lose marks for fluency and cohesion. Worst case scenario, if you stray away too much, the examiner might suspect that you just memorized your answer, since you're not answering it, since you are just talking about a topic which is loosely connected to the question. So it is extremely important, especially if you're aiming at 7+. Now, prepare a piece of paper and a pen, because we're going to listen to 5 people giving very good answers to these questions. I'd like you to write numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the paper and match the answers to the questions that they belong to. So, for example, if you think that the first person answers question A, you write 1A. If you think the first person answers question B, you write 1B, etc. But it's not going to be A, of course. So prepare to listen and do the task.
Track 8.
Sorry. Now.
Track 8. Answer 1.
For a number of reasons. Often I think because they are exhausted. Capital cities in particular can be very demanding places to live. The noise, the traffic, the cost of living. And people often grow tired of all that. It's just too over the top for some. They start to feel drawn to the peace and quiet that rural life might be able to give them. Generally speaking, though, I do think that it's the case that younger people, people like me, are more drawn to that vibrant city lifestyle. As soon as you get older and have a family, you start thinking it's time to move.
Answer 2.
Well, one possibility that I can foresee is that buildings will keep getting taller and taller. This has been going on for some time, all over the world, and so many people now are moving to the city. Unless this changes, we're going to need more and more homes for everyone. We might even see a 500-story skyscraper one day. That might sound ridiculous now, but cities are likely to keep expanding at the rate they are currently. So there will be no other option that I can think of.
Answer 3.
Oh, I think that would be a bit of a disaster, to be honest. Insisting that everyone uses public transport could create more problems than currently exist. Fine, if you were just visiting the city, it probably wouldn't bother you too much. But if you were a resident there, then again, the streets would be safer for pedestrians, and it might do something about the levels of pollution. I do think it is bound to happen, to be honest, so as long as people are happy to use buses and bikes instead of their cars, life will continue as normal.
Answer 4.
I can understand why people want a huge, old-fashioned house. In a similar way to living in the middle of the bright lights of the big city, there's something quite romantic about it. Having said that, I do think it depends on your age. Most people of my age, for example, prefer the idea of coming home to a smart, modern apartment every day, high up in the sky, overlooking the city. Well, it just sounds amazing. Providing I make enough money, I'll definitely be on a top floor myself one day.
Answer 5.
Well, in the old days, your whole life was in one place. You married someone from the same town, you had a job in the same village, and your family stayed around you. In some places, life is still like that. People only need to go next door or downstairs to see their parents, for example. But after people were given the opportunity to move around from one town to another, on trains or even aeroplanes, the traditional family unit started to change, I think. And people are now much more spread out. Not just nationally, but internationally. By the time I'm a grandparent, I think it will be even more different.
If you need, you're welcome to listen to it again. But the correct answers are D, E, A, C, and B. I hope you answered the same. So, with this, let me wrap up the first part of the session, and I'll see you in the next session where we'll discuss how exactly the people from the recordings fulfilled the functions in the questions. Thank you very much, and I'll see you.